The wind howled a mournful symphony against the ancient stones of Blackwood Manor, a desolate lament that seemed to echo the chill deep within Elara. Rain, driven by a furious gale, lashed against the carriage windows, blurring the already fading light into a smear of bruised purples and grays. She hugged her crimson velvet cloak tighter, its rich fabric a small comfort against the encroaching cold, both external and internal. Blackwood, she had been told, was a place where time itself seemed to slow, a sanctuary for those seeking solace. Or perhaps simply a quiet place to disappear. Elara, with her heart a fragile thing after too much upheaval, was seeking a little of both. The carriage lurched, then finally groaned to a halt. A shiver, not entirely from the cold, traced its way up her spine. This was it. The door was opened by a formidable figure. A woman with kind, but no-nonsense eyes, wrapped in a thick wool shawl. "Welcome to Blackwood, Miss Thorne," she said, her voice a warm balm against the storm's fury. "I am Mrs. Gable. We've been expecting you." Elara stepped out into the deluge, the wind snatching at her hair, and quickly made her way under the grand archway. The air inside the manor was thick, with the scent of old wood, beeswax, and something else. Something indefinably earthy and wild, like pine needles and damp earth carried in on the wind. The hall was vast and dimly lit by a scattering of oil lamps and the flickering embers of a massive fireplace. Shadows danced and stretched, giving the ancient space a life of its own. "Come, warm yourself by the fire, dear," Mrs. Gable urged, guiding her towards the hearth where a grand log fire blazed, spitting sparks like tiny fiery stars. Elara shed her sodden cloak, revealing a dress of dark forest green silk that shimmered faintly in the firelight. Fingers, still tingling from the cold, stretched towards the warmth, grateful. "Master Cale will be with you shortly," Mrs. Gable informed her, already bustling away to see to Elara's luggage. "He likes to welcome all his guests, personally." The name Cale resonated in the quiet hall. It was a name Elara had heard only in passing, mentioned by her agent, who had arranged this secluded retreat. A reclusive gentleman owns the estate, rarely seen but ensures all comforts. That was the extent of her knowledge. She had imagined an elderly, perhaps eccentric, figure. She stood there, absorbing the silence, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the relentless drumming of the rain outside. The walls were lined with dark, rich tapestries depicting hunting scenes and mythical forests, their colors muted by age. A grand staircase, carved from the same dark wood that dominated the hall, curved gracefully upwards into the gloom. A subtle shift in the air, a scent of something deep and masculine, oak moss and damp leather, made her turn. He stood at the base of the staircase, a silent sentinel emerging from the shadows. He was not elderly. Not eccentric, not in the way she had imagined. Cale was a man forged from the very essence of Blackwood itself. Tall, with a lean, powerful build that hinted at strength held in reserve. He was dressed in dark trousers and a simple, open-collared shirt of charcoal gray that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. His hair, the color of midnight, fell in a controlled disarray around a face that was strikingly handsome, carved with sharp angles and shadowed planes. But it was his eyes that truly captivated her, the deep, piercing gray of a winter sky, holding an intensity that seemed to see right through her carefully constructed composure. A beat of silence stretched between them, thick and charged. Elara felt a blush creep up her neck, a telltale flush that she tried in vain to suppress. It had been a long time since a man's presence had affected her so profoundly, so immediately. He moved then, a fluid, unhurried grace that defied the starkness of the hall. "Miss Thorne." His voice was low, resonant, like the deep hum of a cello. It was a voice that seemed to vibrate in the very air around her. "Welcome to Blackwood Manor. I am Cale." "Cale?" She managed, her own voice a little breathy, a little higher than she would have liked. She offered a small, tentative smile. "Thank you for having me." The journey was eventful. He inclined his head, a hint of something almost like amusement flickering in those intense eyes. The Blackwood storms can be quite dramatic. I trust Mrs. Gable has seen to your needs? She has been most kind, Elara confirmed, still feeling the lingering warmth of his gaze. It was not overtly flirtatious, but it was undeniably discerning, as if he were taking in every detail of her, from the damp tendrils of hair escaping her braid to the subtle tremble in her hands. Good, he said. And then, after another beat of silence, he gestured towards the fire. Are you quite warm enough? I can have Mrs. Gable bring you something hot to drink. Perhaps some mulled wine? The suggestion was appealing. That would be wonderful, thank you. He turned slightly, his profile sharp against the firelight, and called out, Mrs. Gable, a mulled wine for Miss Thorne, if you please. His voice carried easily, authoritative yet gentle. Mrs. Gable reappeared as if by magic. Right away, Master Cale. Cale then turned his full attention back to Elara. You've come seeking solace, I believe your agent mentioned. There was no judgment in his tone, only a quiet understanding. Elara hesitated, surprised by his directness. Something like that. A change of scenery. A place to write. She was an author, though lately the words had refused to come, trapped somewhere behind a wall of weariness. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. Blackwood is certainly a place for quiet reflection. The silence here can be quite profound once you adjust to it, or the storms. He gestured vaguely towards the window, where the rain still hammered relentlessly. Do you find inspiration in solitude, Miss Thorne? I used to, she confessed, feeling a strange urge to be entirely honest with him. His gaze felt like a gentle probe, inviting candor. Lately, it's been harder to find. Perhaps Blackwood will unlock it for you, he mused, his eyes sweeping over her once more, lingering on the pale curve of her throat, before meeting her gaze again. Many have found their muse within these walls. Mrs. Gable returned with a steaming mug, the rich, spicy aroma of mulled wine filling the air. Elara accepted it gratefully, her fingers wrapping around the warm ceramic. Thank you, Mrs. Gable. Now, if you'll excuse me, I must see to your room, Miss Thorne, Mrs. Gable said, ever efficient. It's the Rose Room just at the top of the grand staircase. Master Cale, will you be joining us for supper? Cale hesitated, his gaze still on Elara. I believe I will, Mrs. Gable. Set for 2 in the small dining room. Elara's heart gave a little lurch. Supper. With him. Excellent. Mrs. Gable beamed and bustled off. I hope you don't mind, Cale said, turning back to Elara. It's a long journey, and I thought a simple meal might be preferable to dining alone on your first night. We can discuss your needs for your stay. Not at all, Elara managed, trying to sound nonchalant. Though inside, a flutter of anticipation had begun. I would be delighted. Good, he said, that faint smile returning. Then if you'll follow me, I'll show you to your room. It's important to settle in properly after such a journey. He led the way, his tall form moving with an easy grace up the grand staircase. Elara followed, her eyes drawn to the strong line of his back, the way his dark hair brushed the collar of his shirt. The scent of him, that wild, earthy, masculine fragrance, lingered in the air, a subtle intoxicant. The Rose Room was a revelation. It was spacious and elegant, decorated in soft creams and muted rose tones, with a large 4-poster bed draped in rich silk. A fire crackled merrily in a small hearth, chasing away the chill and casting a warm, inviting glow. A vase of deep crimson roses sat on a polished mahogany table, their petals unfurling in silent beauty. It's beautiful, Elara breathed, stepping further into the room. I'm glad you approve, Cale said, standing just inside the doorway. His presence seemed to fill the room even from that distance. We aim for comfort here. If there is anything you require, anything at all, please do not hesitate to ask Mrs. Gable or myself. His gaze swept over the room, then returned to her, lingering for a moment too long, making her pulse quicken. I trust you'll find the quiet conducive to your work. I hope so, she murmured, feeling a strange mix of exhilaration and nerves. The quiet here suddenly felt less daunting, more expectant. Supper will be in an hour then, he said, his voice a low promise. Allow yourself to rest, Miss Thorne. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, and then he was gone, leaving Elara alone in the warm, rose-scented room. She moved to the window, drawing back the heavy velvet curtains. The storm still raged, but through a momentary break in the clouds, she saw a sliver of the moon, its light glinting off the wet leaves of the ancient trees that surrounded the manor. Blackwood indeed. A wild, untamed beauty. She unpacked a few necessities, her hands trembling slightly. Her reflection in the antique mirror showed a woman whose cheeks were flushed, whose eyes held a new, unfamiliar spark. She chose a dress of deep sapphire blue velvet, its soft folds designed to cling gently, and brushed her long, dark hair until it shone, letting it fall loose around her shoulders. She wanted to look presentable. More than presentable. She wanted to look as though she belonged in this ancient, elegant place, and in the company of its enigmatic master. Promptly an hour later, a soft knock came at her door. It was Mrs. Gable. Supper is served, Miss Thorne. Elara followed her down a winding corridor, then down a smaller, more intimate staircase, different from the grand one in the main hall. It led to a cozy dining room, much smaller than the one she'd glimpsed earlier, with a single table set for two. The room was aglow with candlelight, casting a warm golden aura over everything. A fire crackled in a smaller hearth, adding to the intimate atmosphere. Cale was already seated, rising as she entered. He had changed into a dark, impeccably tailored jacket, which only enhanced his striking presence. Miss Thorne, he greeted, his eyes alight with a warmth that sent a shiver of pleasure through her. Please, sit. He pulled out her chair with a practiced ease, and Elara found herself settling into the plush velvet, acutely aware of his proximity. The meal was exquisite, a delicate mushroom soup, followed by roasted pheasant with root vegetables, all prepared with a touch of rustic elegance. The wine, a robust claret, was poured by Cale himself, its deep crimson liquid shimmering in the candlelight. Their conversation flowed easily, surprisingly so. Cale asked her about her writing, about the inspiration behind her previous novels, and listened with an attentiveness that was both flattering and unnerving. He spoke of Blackwood, of its history, its forests, and the generations who had lived within its walls, his voice rich with a quiet passion. Elara found herself drawn into his world, captivated by the stories he wove. You speak of this place as if it's a living entity, Elara observed, swirling the crimson wine in her glass. It is, he said, his eyes meeting hers across the flickering candlelight. These walls have seen much. Joy, sorrow, passion, life, in all its raw forms. It holds memories, a resonance. Can you feel it? Elara paused, considering. I think I can. There's a certain energy here. A quiet power. She felt it particularly in his presence, a powerful undercurrent that hummed beneath their polite conversation. He smiled, a genuine, open smile that transformed his features, softening the sharp angles and revealing a hint of vulnerability. Exactly, it asks for your full attention but it gives back generously. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes holding hers. And what of your own stories, Miss Thorne? What raw forms of life do you wish to capture here? The question hung in the air, intimate and challenging. Elara felt a sudden urge to confide in him, to lay bare the truth of her creative block, the emotional scars that had led her to Blackwood. But she hesitated, still guarded. I'm not entirely sure yet, she admitted, her voice softer than intended. Perhaps Blackwood will show me. Cale's gaze remained steady, understanding. Perhaps it will, he murmured, his voice a silken caress. Sometimes, the greatest stories are not found by searching, but by simply allowing them to unfold around you, by opening yourself to what is already there. His eyes dropped to her lips for a fleeting moment, then back to her eyes, and Elara felt a jolt, a spark of pure, unadulterated awareness. The air in the room seemed to thicken, charged with an unspoken electricity. The candlelight flickered, casting their faces in a dance of light and shadow, highlighting the curve of his jaw, the gentle swell of her collarbone. "And what is already here, Mr. Cale?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, a daring question born of the moment's intensity. His smile deepened, a slow, sensual curve of his lips. "That, Miss Thorne," he said, his voice dropping to a low, seductive rumble that vibrated through her very core, "is for us to discover." He reached across the table, his fingers brushing against hers, as he picked up the wine bottle. It was a fleeting, innocent touch, yet it sent a wave of heat through Alara's hand, up her arm, and straight to her heart. Her breath hitched. The crimson wine in their glasses seemed to deepen in hue, reflecting the rising flush on her cheeks, the sudden undeniable thirst that had awakened within her. She felt herself drawn irrevocably into his orbit, a moth to a dangerously beautiful flame. The night was still young, and the storm outside seemed to fade into insignificance compared to the tempest brewing between them. Alara's fingers tingled where his had brushed hers, an electric current that refused to dissipate. She felt a tremor run through her, a delicious shiver that had nothing to do with the chill of the storm. Her gaze, wide and a little breathless, lifted to meet his. His eyes, the color of deep amber in the firelight, held hers captive. They were pools of quiet intensity, mirroring the storm outside yet also containing a profound, almost ancient calm. A faint, knowing smile played at the corners of his lips, a subtle curve that acknowledged the spark that had just flared between them, an unspoken understanding of the heat that now pulsed beneath her skin. He didn't move his hand away immediately. Instead, his thumb, ever so lightly, grazed the back of her knuckles. It was a feather-light touch, barely there, yet it was a deliberate caress that sent a fresh jolt through her, making her breath catch in her throat. "Alara," he murmured, his voice a low thrum that resonated deep within her chest, like the plucked string of a cello. He said her name as if testing its taste, as if it were a rare and delicate vintage he was savoring. "You have a certain luminescence about you." A blush bloomed across her cheeks, a heat that had nothing to do with the roaring fire beside them. She felt exposed, seen, and utterly captivated. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She wanted to speak, to offer some witty retort, to regain a semblance of her usual composure, but the words seemed to have deserted her. All she could manage was a soft, almost imperceptible gasp. He finally, slowly, withdrew his hand, the warmth lingering on her skin long after the physical contact ceased. He picked up his wine glass, his movements fluid and unhurried, never breaking eye contact. He took a sip, his gaze still locked with hers over the rim of the glass. The air between them was thick, charged with an unspoken language of desire and anticipation. It was a silence that spoke volumes, a symphony of unspoken longing. "The storm," he said, finally breaking the spell of their silent communion, though the intensity in his eyes remained undimmed. "It sounds as though it's settling in for the night." Alara nodded, finding her voice at last, though it was a little breathy. "It does. I hadn't expected it to be quite so dramatic." She gestured vaguely towards the window, where the rain lashed against the panes, and the wind howled a mournful tune. "It's quite a contrast to the warmth in here." He chuckled softly, a rich, deep sound that sent another shiver down her spine. "Indeed. A sanctuary against the elements. A place where other kinds of tempests can brew, perhaps?" His eyes twinkled with a knowing light, a playful challenge that Alara found herself unable to resist. "And what kind of tempests might those be, Mr. Thorne?" she asked, her voice gaining a touch more confidence, a hint of the playful flirtation she usually reserved for less potent encounters. He leaned back in his armchair, a picture of relaxed elegance, yet his gaze remained sharp and focused on her. "Ah, Alara, the most intriguing kind. The ones that rage not with wind and rain, but with desire and discovery. The ones that can reshape the landscape of the heart." Her breath hitched again. He spoke with such directness, yet with such poetic grace, that she felt herself unraveling, layer by layer. This was not mere flirtation, this was something deeper, something elemental. "Are you suggesting," she began, her voice a little shaky, "that we are on the cusp of such a tempest?" A slow smile spread across his face, a smile that promised both danger and delight. "Perhaps. The night is, as you said, young, and the portents are certainly compelling." He gestured with his wineglass, a subtle invitation. "More wine?" Elara nodded, her hands still tingling from his touch. "Please." He rose from his chair, his movements graceful and powerful, like a predator in slow motion. He moved to a side table where a crystal decanter gleamed, catching the firelight. As he poured, his back was to her, but Elara felt his presence intensely. She watched the strong line of his shoulders, the way his dark hair fell just so at the nape of his neck. A sudden, almost overwhelming urge to reach out and touch him, to feel the warmth of his skin, surged through her. She clasped her hands tightly in her lap, trying to rein in the burgeoning desire. He turned, 2 full glasses in hand, and approached her. Instead of returning to his own chair, he paused beside hers. The scent of him, a subtle blend of sandalwood, old paper, and something uniquely masculine and clean, enveloped her. It was intoxicating. He bent slightly, offering her a glass, and for a fleeting moment his arm brushed her shoulder. The contact was brief, accidental, yet it sent a jolt of heat through her, a reminder of the electric current that seemed to flow between them. "Thank you," she whispered, her fingers brushing his as she took the glass. Another spark, another silent acknowledgement. He didn't immediately move away. Instead, he remained standing beside her chair, gazing down at her. His proximity was overwhelming, yet she found she couldn't move, couldn't look away. Her pulse quickened, a drumbeat in her ears. She felt the warmth radiating from his body, the subtle pull of his presence. "This house," he began, his voice a soft murmur, closer now, "it has a way of revealing secrets, doesn't it? Of drawing out what lies beneath the surface." He wasn't looking at the house, though. His eyes were fixed solely on her, as if searching for the deepest truths hidden within her own gaze. Elara swallowed, her throat suddenly dry despite the wine in her hand. "Secrets?" she managed, her voice barely a whisper. "What kind of secrets?" "The secrets of the heart, Elara," he replied, his voice dropping to an even lower register. "Intimate and compelling. The desires we keep hidden, even from ourselves. The longings that only truly come alive in the quiet of the night, when the world outside is hushed by the storm." He slowly raised his hand, and for a heart-stopping moment, Elara thought he was going to touch her face. Her breath caught. Her eyes fluttered closed for a fraction of a second, anticipating the contact. But he didn't. Instead, his fingers, long and elegant, merely brushed a stray strand of hair from her temple, tucking it gently behind her ear. The lightest of touches, yet it was enough to send a wave of exquisite sensation through her, making her shiver. "You are beautiful, Elara," he said, his voice a caress, his eyes holding hers in a gaze so intense it felt like a physical touch. "Truly beautiful." The compliment, delivered with such sincerity and passion, left her speechless. She felt a blush deepen on her cheeks, a warmth that spread through her entire body. She had received compliments before, of course, but never one that felt so utterly consuming, so utterly untrue. It wasn't just about her appearance, it felt like he was seeing into her very soul, acknowledging a beauty she hadn't even known she possessed. He finally moved, settling back into his own armchair. But the proximity, the lingering scent, the memory of his touch, remained. The air between them thrummed with an unspoken energy, a palpable tension. "Tell me, Elara," he continued, his voice softer now, almost conversational yet still laced with that underlying intensity. "What draws you to this place, to this solitary pursuit of knowledge?" Elara took a moment to compose herself, to find her footing after the dizzying compliment. She took a slow sip of her wine, letting the rich taste settle on her tongue, giving herself time to gather her thoughts. "I'm a historian, Mr. Thorne. I specialize in forgotten stories, the lives of those who shaped history, but whose voices were silenced or overshadowed. This house, the archives it contains, it's a treasure trove." She paused, her gaze drifting around the opulent room, now bathed in the warm, dancing light of the fire. There's a sense of history here, a feeling of stories waiting to be told. He nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. And what story in particular has captivated you here? The story of Lady Seraphina, Ilara confessed, a spark of her usual academic passion returning, a welcome anchor in the swirling sea of her emotions. She was the original mistress of this estate. A woman of incredible intellect and artistic talent, yet her life ended tragically. There are whispers, legends, of a love affair, a betrayal, a broken heart that haunts these very halls. A shadow seemed to pass over his eyes, a fleeting darkness that Ilara couldn't quite decipher. "Ah, Seraphina," he murmured, his voice tinged with an unexpected melancholy. "A truly remarkable woman, and a deeply misunderstood one." "You speak of her as if you knew her," Ilara observed, a note of curiosity entering her voice. The way he spoke, the depth of emotion in his tone, was profound. He smiled, a wistful, enigmatic expression. History, Ilara, is not always confined to the pages of books. Sometimes it lives on in the very air we breathe, in the echoes of the past that resonate in the present. I have spent many years immersed in such echoes. Ilara felt a thrill of intrigue. He was a man of mysteries, a man who seemed to inhabit the liminal space between past and present. "Then perhaps you can help me understand her story better," she said, leaning forward slightly, her academic curiosity now fully engaged, a temporary reprieve from the dizzying pull of his presence. "The official accounts are so sparse, so dismissive of her true character." "Perhaps," he conceded, his eyes sparkling once more with that knowing light. "But some stories are best understood not through facts and dates, but through feeling, through empathy, through experiencing the kind of passion that defined Seraphina's life." His gaze intensified, and Ilara felt the conversation shift, once again, from the academic to the deeply personal. He wasn't just talking about Seraphina anymore, he was talking about Wytham. "What kind of passion was that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, drawn in by his magnetic pull. "A passion that burned bright and fierce," he replied, his voice a low rumble. "A passion that consumed, that demanded everything. A passion that once awakened, could not be denied." He leaned forward slightly, mirroring her posture, closing the invisible distance between them. "Do you believe in such passions, Ilara?" Ilara felt a strange, thrilling tremor pass through her. Her usual caution, her intellectual detachment, seemed to be melting away under the heat of his gaze, under the sheer force of his presence. She had always prided herself on her rationality, her ability to analyze and dissect. But with him, she felt as if she were being drawn into a realm beyond logic, a world of pure sensation and emotion. I believe they exist," she admitted, her voice hesitant, "in stories, in legends. But to truly experience such a thing..." She trailed off, a faint blush returning to her cheeks. "To truly experience it," he finished, his voice a silken caress, "is to live, to feel the very marrow of life, to be utterly gloriously alive." He lifted his glass, a silent toast. "To passion, Ilara." Ilara lifted her own glass, her hand trembling slightly, and met his gaze. "To passion?" she echoed, and drank. The wine, rich and velvety, seemed to burn a path down her throat, mirroring the fire that was now igniting within her. A clap of thunder, unusually close, rattled the windows, making Ilara jump. She gasped softly, her eyes widening. "The storm is growing restless," he observed, his voice calm amidst the sudden tumult. "Perhaps it echoes the restlessness of our own spirits, Ilara?" He rose from his chair again, his movements seamless. "Come," he said, holding out a hand to her, a gesture of silent invitation. "Let's move closer to the fire. It offers a certain solace against the wildness of the night." Ilara hesitated for only a moment, then placed her hand in his. His touch was firm and warm, sending another jolt through her. He drew her gently to her feet, and for a fleeting instant she found herself standing much closer to him than she had anticipated. His height, his broad shoulders, the sheer masculine power of him enveloped her. She could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the intoxicating scent that clung to him. Her gaze flickered up to his, and she saw a deep, unreadable intensity in his eyes. He didn't release her hand immediately. Instead, he led her towards the grand stone fireplace, where the logs crackled and spat, sending showers of sparks dancing up the chimney. A thick, plush rug lay before the hearth, inviting warmth and intimacy. "Here," he said, his voice a low murmur, his thumb stroking the back of her hand with exquisite tenderness. "This is better." He released her hand slowly, almost reluctantly, as they reached the rug. Ilara felt a pang of disappointment at the loss of contact, even as she was overwhelmed by the sheer proximity to him. She stood beside him, bathed in the golden glow of the fire. The sounds of the storm, a distant roar compared to the frantic beating of her own heart. He knelt gracefully, picking up a heavy brass poker, and began to artfully arrange the logs, coaxing the flames into a more vigorous dance. The muscles in his forearms flexed and relaxed beneath the fine fabric of his shirt, a subtle display of strength that Ilara found herself mesmerized by. The firelight played across his profile, highlighting the sharp line of his jaw, the aristocratic curve of his nose, the sensual fullness of his lips. "A fire, Ilara," he mused, without looking up, his voice a rich baritone, "is much like passion. It requires careful tending. If neglected, it dwindles. If fed too aggressively, it can consume everything in its path. But if nurtured with care and respect, it can offer unparalleled warmth and light." He finished his task, the flames now leaping higher, casting dancing shadows on the walls. He rose slowly, turning to face her. They were standing very close now, the heat of the fire on one side, the heat of his body on the other. Ilara felt trapped, in the most delicious way. "And what kind of fire are you hoping to tend tonight, Mr. Thorne?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, her gaze locked with his. The air was thick with unspoken longing, with the promise of something profound and transformative. A slow, sensual smile spread across his lips, and his eyes darkened, becoming even more intense. "The kind that leaves an indelible mark, Ilara. The kind that warms you from the inside out, chases away the chill of the storm, and perhaps illuminates truths you never knew existed within yourself." He reached out, his hand moving with a deliberate slowness that heightened the anticipation. This time there was no mistaking his intention. His fingers, warm and strong, gently cupped her jaw. His thumb brushed softly over the sensitive skin beneath her earlobe, sending a shiver of pure pleasure through her. "You are a creature of exquisite sensitivity, aren't you?" he murmured, his voice a low, husky whisper that seemed to bypass her ears and go straight to her soul. His gaze dropped to her lips, lingering there for a long, breathless moment. Ilara's own lips parted slightly. A silent invitation, a silent plea. Her heart pounded, a frantic drum in her chest. Every nerve ending in her body seemed to be alight, humming with an unbearable tension. She felt herself leaning into his touch, drawn by an irresistible force. The storm outside raged, a symphony of wind and rain, but within the confines of the firelit room, all that existed was the two of them, and the potent, electrifying current that flowed between them. He slowly, agonizingly slowly lowered his head. Ilara's eyes fluttered closed, her breath catching. She could feel the warmth of his breath on her lips, the subtle scent of him filling her senses. The world narrowed to this one moment, this one exquisite anticipation. Her whole being yearned for his touch, for the consummation of this unspoken desire. Just when she thought her heart would burst from the suspense, he stopped. His lips hovered mere millimeters from hers, a breath away. She could feel the soft brush of his mouth, but not quite the kiss. It was an exquisite torment, a teasing delay that made her body tremble with frustrated longing. "Are you afraid, Ilara?" he whispered, his voice a low rumble against her lips, his thumb still caressing her jaw. Her eyes slowly opened, meeting his, which were dark and smoldering with unbridled desire, yet also held a question, a gentle respect for her boundaries. "No," she breathed, The word a fragile whisper, a confession. "No, I'm not afraid." "Good," he murmured, a hint of satisfaction in his tone. "Because what is brewing between us, Ilara, is something that cannot be contained by fear." He didn't kiss her then, not fully. Instead, he simply pressed his forehead against hers, closing his eyes. His touch was firm, yet gentle, a silent communion that spoke volumes. Ilara felt a wave of dizzying sensation wash over her, a deep, profound connection that transcended mere physical attraction. It was as if their minds, their souls, were intertwining, merging in the firelit warmth. The storm outside seemed a crescendo, a wild, untamed force, perfectly mirroring the tempest that raged within Ilara's own heart. She felt a profound sense of surrender, a willingness to be swept away by this man, by this intoxicating dance of desire and discovery. He slowly pulled back, his eyes opening, their intensity undiminished. He kept his hand cupping her jaw, his thumb still stroking her skin. "There are other parts of this house, Ilara," he said, his voice husky, "that hold even more stories, more secrets, perhaps even more warmth." His gaze dropped to her lips again, lingering, a silent promise. Then, with a deliberate slowness that was almost unbearable, he moved his hand from her jaw, his fingers trailing down her neck, sending goosebumps prickling over her skin. He took her hand again, his fingers intertwining with hers, a firm, possessive grip. "Come," he said, his voice a soft command, an irresistible invitation. "Let me show you." He led her away from the fireplace, past the elegant furniture, towards a dimly lit corridor she hadn't noticed before. The heavy oak door at the end of it seemed to beckon, promising unknown wonders. The air grew cooler as they moved away from the hearth, but Ilara felt a heat within her that more than compensated for the change in temperature. Her hand felt alive in his, a conduit for the electric current that connected them. The corridor was lined with ancestral portraits, their eyes seeming to follow them as they passed. The house felt more alive now, imbued with a strange, almost magical energy. Each step they took seemed to deepen the sense of intimacy, of shared adventure. He stopped before a heavy, carved wooden door, distinct from the others. It bore no portrait, only intricate patterns of interwoven leaves and vines. He released her hand to reach for a key that hung on a chain around his neck, a silver key that glinted in the dim light. The gesture was intimate, revealing a piece of himself, a hidden access he was now granting her. He inserted the key into the lock, and with a soft click, the door swung open, revealing a room bathed in a soft, diffused light, utterly different from the grand drawing room. This was clearly a library, but unlike any Ilara had ever seen. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined every wall, laden with ancient, leather-bound tomes. A faint, comforting scent of old paper, beeswax, and a hint of something floral and exotic filled the air. In the center of the room, a large antique globe stood sentinel, its brass meridian gleaming. But what truly drew Ilara's eye was the large, circular window at the far end, through which the storm outside was framed like a dramatic painting. Rain lashed against the thick glass, blurring the dark shapes of trees beyond, and every now and then a flash of lightning illuminated the room with a stark, fleeting brilliance. "My sanctuary," he said, his voice soft to hear, a note of personal reverence in it. "Where I come to seek solace and sometimes to dream." He gestured for her to enter. Ilara stepped inside, feeling a sense of awe. The room was both grand and intensely personal. Comfortable armchairs, upholstered in rich dark velvet, were arranged around a low, polished table. A small, unlit fireplace stood in one corner, but the room itself seemed to hold a natural warmth, a hushed, contemplative energy. He followed her in, gently closing the heavy door behind them, sealing them away from the rest of the house, from the world outside. The sound of the storm became a muffled roar, a distant symphony, to their burgeoning intimacy. "It's magnificent," Ilara breathed, her eyes wide with wonder as she took in the towering shelves, the intricate bindings, the sheer volume of knowledge contained within these walls. "A true treasure?" He smiled. A genuine, unguarded smile, that softened the intensity in his eyes. "I thought you would appreciate it. A fellow scholar after all." He moved to a small hidden bar cabinet, extracting 2 glasses and a decanter of what appeared to be a rich amber liquid. "Perhaps something a little stronger for this particular storm?" Ilara nodded, still mesmerized by her surroundings. "Whatever you recommend." He poured a generous measure into each glass, the liquid catching the ambient light with a warm glow. As he handed her a glass, his fingers brushed hers again. A familiar jolt. This time the contact lingered, his thumbs stroking the back of her hand for a moment longer than necessary before he released her. "Cognac," he explained, "aged and refined. Like some stories, it improves with time and reveals its true depth when savored slowly." Ilara took a sip. The cognac was smooth, warm, and subtly complex, a luxurious burn that spread through her chest. It was the perfect counterpoint to the wildness outside and the growing heat within her. He led her to one of the velvet armchairs, settling into the one opposite her. The chairs were positioned to face the large circular window, offering a dramatic view of the storm. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping their drinks, watching the rain streak down the glass, the lightning illuminating the churning world outside. "Tell me more about Serafina," Ilara prompted, her voice soft. She knew he wasn't just indulging her academic interest. There was a deeper meaning in his willingness to share. He took a slow sip of his cognac, his gaze thoughtful as it rested on the storm outside. Serafina. She was a woman who understood passion. Not just intellectual passion, but the kind that pulses in the blood, that ignites the soul. She was fiercely independent, defying the conventions of her time, seeking truth and beauty wherever she could find it. He paused, his gaze slowly turning back to Ilara, a profound intensity in his eyes. She loved with an intensity that few could comprehend, a love that became her undoing, yet also, perhaps, her greatest triumph. "Her undoing?" Ilara asked, leaning forward, captivated. "Her heart was broken," he said, his voice tinged with a deep sadness. "Betrayed by the one she loved, and by the rigid society that condemned her for daring to love so freely. But even in her sorrow, she found a way to leave her mark, to immortalize her passion." "How?" Ilara whispered, utterly entranced. He smiled, a faint, melancholic curve of his lips. "Through her art, through her spirit, and through the very fabric of this house. They say," he continued, his voice dropping to an even lower, more intimate tone, "that her spirit still lingers here. That she waits for someone to truly understand her, to awaken the dormant passions that still echo within these walls." His gaze held hers, an unspoken question in their depths. Ilara felt a chill, not of fear, but of profound understanding. He wasn't just telling her a story, he was inviting her into it. He was suggesting that Ingaushe might be the one to awaken those dormant passions. "Do you believe in ghosts, Mr. Thorne?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. He chuckled softly, a low, rumbling sound. "I believe in echoes, Ilara, in the enduring power of human emotion. And I believe that when two souls connect with such intensity, their energy can ripple through time, leaving an indelible imprint." His gaze was piercing, making her feel as though he could see the very ripples of emotion stirring within her. He set his glass down on the small table between them, then slowly reached out, his hand resting on her knee. The velvet of her dress was thin, and she felt the immediate warmth of his palm, a heat that spread like wildfire through her veins. It was a bold, intimate gesture, yet delivered with such tender certainty that Ilara didn't flinch, didn't pull away. Instead, a soft gasp escaped her lips, and her eyes fluttered closed for a moment, savoring the sensation. His thumb began to stroke the soft fabric of her dress, a slow, rhythmic caress that sent exquisite shivers through her. It was a touch that promised more, a touch that spoke of longing and unspoken desires. "This house," he murmured, his voice husky, close. "It is a place of stories, and tonight, Ilara, I believe we are writing our own." Ilara opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. They were dark, intense, and filled with an almost primal hunger, yet tempered by a profound tenderness. She felt utterly consumed, utterly lost in the depth of his eyes, in the intoxicating pull of his presence. Her hand, almost instinctively, reached out and covered his on her knee, her fingers intertwining with his, a silent affirmation of her desire, her willingness to explore this tempest brewing between them. The cognac warmed her from the inside, the fire of his touch ignited her skin, and the storm outside raged, a dramatic backdrop to the storm within her heart. The night was deepening, and Alara knew with a certainty that both thrilled and terrified her that this was only the beginning. She was ready to be swept away. His fingers, warm and strong, tightened around hers, a silent question in the pressure. Alara met his gaze, her heart thrumming a wild rhythm against her ribs, a counterpoint to the howling wind outside. The air in the room, thick with the scent of oak and cognac, seemed to crackle with an unspoken energy. His eyes, the color of rich, dark earth, held hers, unwavering, a promise and a plea intertwined. He leaned in, slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, to break the spell. But Alara didn't move. She couldn't. Her breath hitched as his warmth enveloped her. The subtle scent of his skin, a clean, masculine aroma, spiced with the faintest hint of the cognac they'd shared, filling her senses. His lips, soft and hesitant at first, brushed against hers. It was an exquisite torment, a feather-light touch that promised untold depths. She gasped, a tiny sound lost in the storm's roar, and in that instant, his hesitation vanished. His mouth claimed hers with a newfound urgency, a gentle yet firm pressure that sent a jolt of pure electricity through her. It wasn't a sudden, aggressive kiss, but a slow, deliberate exploration. A tender unfolding. His hand, still intertwined with hers, moved, his thumb stroking the back of her hand, a small, reassuring gesture that deepened the intimacy. Her free hand, almost without conscious thought, lifted to his cheek, her fingers tracing the sharp line of his jaw, feeling the slight roughness of his evening stubble. The kiss deepened, becoming more insistent, more consuming. She tasted the lingering warmth of the cognac on his tongue, a fiery sweetness that mirrored the fire now coursing through her veins. Her lips parted in invitation, and his tongue, warm and velvety, danced with hers, a tender skirmish that left her breathless, lightheaded. Time seemed to dissolve, melting into the delicious press of their mouths, the soft sighs that escaped them, the rising heat that permeated the space between them. He pulled back slightly, just enough for their foreheads to touch, his breath mingling with hers. "Alara," he whispered, his voice a low rumble, laced with a raw emotion that thrilled her to her core. "You have no idea how long I've wanted to do that." A soft, shaky laugh escaped her. "Oh, I think I might," she murmured, her fingers still caressing his cheek. "I think I've wanted you to, too." His eyes, full of wonder, and a hunger that mirrored her own, searched hers. Then, with a soft groan, he kissed her again, this time with a primal intensity that left no room for doubt. It was a kiss of complete surrender, a powerful statement of desire. His hand released hers, moving up her arm, gliding over the delicate fabric of her sleeve, sending shivers down her spine. He traced the curve of her shoulder, then cupped the back of her neck, his thumb stroking the sensitive skin behind her ear. Her fingers tangled in his hair, soft and thick against her scalp, pulling him closer still. The world outside, with its raging tempest, faded into insignificance. There was only the warmth of his body pressed against hers, the intoxicating taste of his mouth, the dizzying sensation of falling into something vast and beautiful, and utterly unknown. His other hand found her waist, drawing her closer until there was no space left between them. She felt the hard planes of his chest against her breasts, the tautness of his thighs against hers. The sensation was exquisite, a silent language of bodies speaking desires, long held captive. A soft moan escaped her as his hips pressed gently into hers, a silent, undeniable promise. "Let's get closer to the fire," he murmured against her lips, his voice husky. It was an excuse, they both knew, to move, to shift, to prolong the exquisite torture of their proximity. He rose slowly, drawing her up with him. Her legs felt weak, her head light. They moved as one, a dance of two souls finally finding their rhythm, until they stood directly in front of the roaring hearth. The flames cast dancing shadows across their faces, illuminating the flush on her cheeks, the fierce adoration in his eyes. He reached for her, his hands finding the buttons of her blouse, slowly, deliberately. Each unfastened button was a small gasp of air, a moment of anticipation. His gaze never left hers, an intimate connection that made the act of undressing feel sacred, a mutual unveiling. When the last button was undone, he gently pushed the fabric from her shoulders, letting it fall to the floor in a soft whisper of silk. She stood before him, in her lace camisole, the delicate fabric clinging to her curves, her skin tingling in the warmth of the fire. His eyes, dark and appreciative, drank her in. He reached out, his fingertips tracing the lace edge, then gently brushing against her bare skin, just above the swell of her breast. A shiver, both of cold and exquisite pleasure, ran through her. "Beautiful," he breathed, his voice thick with emotion. Emboldened, Alara mirrored his actions, her fingers finding the buttons of his shirt. Her touch was less practiced, but no less determined. She felt the warmth of his skin beneath her fingertips as she worked the buttons free, her gaze fixed on his, a silent conversation passing between them. When his shirt hung open, she pushed it back, revealing the strong, sculpted lines of his chest, dusted with dark hair. She pressed her palms against his skin, feeling the steady beat of his heart against hers, the warmth radiating from him. The scent of him, clean and masculine, filled her head, intoxicating her further. He pulled her into an embrace, skin against skin, the heat of the fire on their backs, the heat of their bodies melding together. Her head rested against his shoulder, his chin tucked into her hair. It was a moment of profound peace, amidst the rising storm of their desire. She felt utterly safe, utterly desired. "We should go upstairs," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the wind, her lips brushing against his warm skin. He nodded, a silent agreement. He took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers once more, and led her from the living room. The grand staircase, usually a formal passage, felt like a path to discovery tonight. Each step was a beat of anticipation, a deepening of the unspoken promise. The only light came from the occasional flicker of lightning through a tall window and the soft glow of a sconce in the upper hallway. The house was quiet save for the storm, a silent witness to their journey. His bedroom, when they entered it, was a sanctuary of muted colors and rich textures. A large, four-poster bed dominated the room, draped in soft linens and a thick duvet. A fire crackled softly in a smaller fireplace, casting a warm, inviting glow. He had clearly prepared for her, though they hadn't spoken of it. The air was subtly scented with lavender and cedar, calming and sensual at once. He turned to her, his hands gently framing her face. His thumbs caressed her cheekbones, his eyes still searching hers, asking, affirming. "Are you sure, Alara?" he asked, his voice low, filled with respect and tenderness. "No regrets." "No regrets, Julian," she confirmed, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. "Only this." She leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to his lips, a testament to her unwavering desire. He smiled, a deep, beautiful smile that reached his eyes, and then, slowly, deliberately, he began to undress her again. This time, there was no hesitation. His fingers, deft and knowing, unhooked her bra, letting it fall to the floor with a whisper of lace. Her breasts, full and aching for his touch, were exposed to the soft, warm air. He looked at them, a silent appreciation in his gaze, then met her eyes, a silent question. She nodded, her breath catching in her throat. He leaned down, his lips brushing against the sensitive skin of her décolletage, then lower, until he took one nipple gently into his mouth. A gasp escaped her, a wave of sensation washing over her, from her chest to her core. He suckled softly, his tongue tracing circles, sending shivers through her entire body. She arched into him, her hands finding purchase on his shoulders, holding on as if to steady herself against the delicious onslaught. He moved to her skirt, his fingers expertly finding the zip, easing it down. The silk fabric slithered down her hips, pooling at her feet. She stepped out of it, then out of her delicate panties, leaving her completely bare before him. The vulnerability was exhilarating, freeing. She felt exposed, yet cherished. Then, it was his turn. She watched, mesmerized, as he shed his trousers, then his boxers. His body, lean and powerfully built, was revealed to her, the evidence of his desire for her undeniable. He was magnificent, a sculpted work of art. Her gaze lingered, appreciative, hungry. He held out a hand to her, and she took it, her fingers intertwining with his. He led her to the bed, the soft, cool sheets inviting them. They lay down together, facing each other, their bodies aligned, skin against skin, warmth against warmth. The contrast of his rougher skin against her smoother one was a potent sensation. His hand stroked her arm, then her side, then her hip, a slow, sensual exploration that ignited every nerve ending. Her own hand found his chest, tracing the contours of his muscles, feeling the steady thrum of his heart. She explored the texture of his hair, the strength of his shoulders, the flat planes of his stomach. Their mouths met again, a deep, consuming kiss that left no doubt of their shared hunger. His leg tangled with hers, his thigh pressing between her own, a gentle friction that promised more. He moved over her, slowly, carefully, supporting himself on his forearms, his eyes never leaving hers. "Ilara," he whispered, his voice thick with desire, his gaze burning into hers. "You are everything I never knew I was looking for." Tears pricked at the corner of her eyes, tears of joy, of recognition, of profound connection. "And you, Julian," she whispered back, her voice choked with emotion, "you are everything I've secretly hoped for." He lowered himself further, pressing his body fully against hers. The sensation was electric, a perfect fit. He found her lips again, kissing her deeply, passionately, as his hips began to move, a slow, deliberate rhythm that mirrored the ancient dance of lovers. She arched to meet him, her own body responding instinctively, eagerly. He entered her slowly, deliberately, giving her time to adjust, to absorb the exquisite sensation of their joining. Her breath caught in her throat, a soft moan escaping her as he filled her completely. It was a feeling of profound completeness, of coming home. She wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him closer, deeper, needing more. The rhythm quickened, becoming a primal dance of shared pleasure. Each thrust was met with a gasp, a sigh, a soft cry. Their bodies moved in perfect synchronicity, a symphony of touch and sensation. The world outside the window, with its raging storm, faded into a distant murmur. There was only the heat of their bodies, the scent of their skin, the sound of their mingled breaths, the rising tide of their passion. He kissed her neck, her shoulder, her collarbone, leaving a trail of fire in his wake. Her hands gripped his back, her nails digging in gently as she surrendered to the escalating pleasure. Her mind emptied of everything but the moment, the sensation, the profound connection with this man who had, in a single night, swept her away and anchored her completely. The crescendo built, a wave of pure, unadulterated bliss washing over her. She felt her body tighten, contract, a shimmering explosion of pleasure that reverberated through every cell. She cried out his name, a breathless whisper, as he groaned, his own release a powerful echoing surge that brought them both to a shuddering, breathless halt. They lay entwined, their bodies slick with sweat, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. The storm outside had begun to subside, its fury replaced by a soft, rhythmic patter against the window pane. Julian shifted, pulling her closer, tucking her head into the crook of his neck. His arm wrapped around her waist, holding her securely against him. "Ilara," he whispered, his voice husky with emotion that was incredible. She hummed in agreement, too sated and content to form coherent words. She felt utterly cherished, loved, and alive. Her fingers traced the strong line of his arm, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her fingertips. The warmth of his body was a comforting cocoon, chasing away the last vestiges of the storm's chill. They drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, the soft glow of the dying fire casting long shadows across the room, the gentle rain a lullaby. Fee, eyes. Ilara awoke slowly, a sense of profound peace settling over her. The first blush of dawn painted the sky outside a soft, hopeful gray, and the storm had finally passed, leaving behind a world washed clean. The air was crisp and fresh, no longer thick with the scent of rain and earth, but with the subtle, intimate scent of two bodies that had become one. She was still in Julian's arms, her head nestled against his chest, his strong arm wrapped around her. His breathing was deep and even, a comforting rhythm that lulled her. She lifted her head slightly, peering up at his face. He looked younger in sleep, his features softened, a faint smile playing on his lips. A tender ache spread through her chest. This was what she had longed for, unknowingly, for so long. This feeling of belonging, of being utterly seen and desired. As if sensing her gaze, Julian stirred, his eyelids fluttering open. His eyes, though still heavy with sleep, found hers, and a slow, beautiful smile spread across his face, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that sent a delicious shiver down her spine. He tightened his embrace, pulling her closer still. "Good morning," she replied, her voice soft, still thick with sleep and contentment. She leaned up, pressing a gentle kiss to his lips. It was a morning kiss, tender and sweet, full of the promise of a new day. He returned the kiss, deepening it slightly, his tongue brushing hers, a soft reminder of the passion they had shared just hours before. "Sleep well?" he asked, his fingers tracing lazy circles on her bare back. "Perfectly," she confessed, her cheeks flushing slightly. "The best sleep I've had in years." He chuckled softly, the sound vibrating through his chest. "Mine too. Perhaps it's a new remedy for insomnia." They lay there for a while longer, simply basking in each other's presence, the quiet intimacy of the morning. The world felt fresh, imbued with a new sense of possibility. The awkwardness she might have expected after such a night was entirely absent, replaced by a comfortable familiarity, a deep sense of rightness. Eventually, Julian stirred again. "As much as I'd like to stay here all day," he said, pressing a lingering kiss to her hair, "I think coffee might be in order. And perhaps some breakfast." Ilara laughed, a light, joyful sound. "I second that. I'm starving." They rose slowly, their movements unhurried, each touch a deliberate act of affection. Julian found a soft plush robe for her, and she wrapped herself in its warmth, the scent of him clinging to the fabric. She watched him pull on a pair of comfortable trousers, his movements fluid and graceful. Even in the mundane act of dressing, he exuded a quiet strength that captivated her. Hand in hand they descended the grand staircase again, this time bathed in the soft morning light. The living room, which had been a haven of intense emotion last night, now felt serene, the lingering scent of cognac and wood smoke, a pleasant memory. The debris of their clothes from the night before had been cleared by an unseen hand, leaving the room tidy and welcoming. In the kitchen, the aroma of brewing coffee filled the air. Julian moved with an easy competence, preparing a simple breakfast of fresh fruit, warm pastries and eggs. Ilara sat at the large wooden island, sipping her coffee, watching him, a profound sense of contentment settling over her. It felt natural, domestic, yet infused with a new, exhilarating spark. "So," he said, turning from the stove, a plate of perfectly scrambled eggs in hand, "what happens now, Ilara?" His gaze was open, honest, a hint of vulnerability in their depths. Ilara met his eyes, a small smile playing on her lips. She thought of the storm, the wildness, the surrender. She thought of the quiet peace of his arms, the profound connection that had blossomed between them. "I think," she began, her voice soft but firm, "what happens now is, we don't let this end." Julian's smile widened, a radiant, joyful expression that lit up his entire face. He set the plate down and came around the island, pulling her gently to her feet. He took her face in his hands, his thumbs caressing her cheeks. "I was hoping you'd say that," he murmured, his voice thick with relief and happiness. He leaned in, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to her lips, a promise of all the mornings and nights to come. "I have a feeling this is just the beginning of our story, Alara." She wrapped her arms around his waist, holding him close, feeling the warmth and strength of his body. "A very good beginning," she whispered, her heart overflowing with a happiness she hadn't known was possible. The storm had brought them together, stripping away their inhibitions, revealing their deepest desires. And in its wake, a new, beautiful world had opened up, full of passion, tenderness, and an undeniable love, ready to be explored, one sensual, thrilling moment at a time. The night had indeed swept her away, and she was more than ready to stay swept.